The troubled teen industry is problematic. Have you ever been a part of it or seen people go into it for whatever reason? This is someone else's post, by the way. And then I said, yep, I haven't been in the typical ranch TTI, but I've been in what I call other branches of the Cash for Kids system. And by the way, TTIs, that stands for Troubled Teen Industry. Some people say institute or institution or something, not institute. Some people say institution. But basically what those are, or what I define them as, is a half juvenile justice, half mental facility, but there also can be like some cult stuff tied into it, although, I mean, really the whole Cash for Kids system for society in general is kind of a cult, but anyway, it's like that, but also they cost money, like out-of-pocket money. Other branches of the Cash for Kids system are commonly funded by medical insurance or just taxpayer dollars. I mean, the whole thing is still ran by taxpayer dollars. I mean, of course, because that's how medical insurance works anyway. But TTIs are kind of for like rich people to send their kids to be abused at, like boarding schools or military schools, because I'm pretty sure you have to pay for those too. And there's actually a story I could tell about someone I knew who grew up in those, but that would be for another video. So yeah, that's what a TTI is. But anyway, I was in the mental health system branch about 2 times, but since narcissistic family systems tend to label scapegoats, I was labeled as a mental label, or just the usual stuff that goes along with the labels you get in the Cash for Kids system, which is bad, crazy, and slow. And a lot of different things can like fall under those 3 categories. I hope I'm saying this right and it's making sense. Okay, wait, where was I? Label scapegoats. I was in a Munchausen situation even once I was no longer being locked up or drugged at 12. My mom had a new lie every year, but she mostly said I was mentally retarded and handicapped. I was also eventually put in what I call a fake school placement twice. The last one was a racial Jim Crow. I should have put error at the end, but especially a self-confined placement where the staff lied about things all day. And that's a funny story, but basically by lied about things, they would even lie to my mom about like them not really being a part of the school and them just being on the school's campus. And their excuse, this is not coming out right, was that was why I wasn't allowed around the kids that went to school in the building. There was a whole bunch of stuff with that, but yeah, they lied all day about all types of things and were really toxic and manipulative and had a lot of their own unhealed trauma, which was kind of their excuse for getting that job in the first place. But it wasn't for academics, so it wasn't what people usually think of as special ed. And another thing that I could say is kind of like a side thing is that, AG and gifted, that's also special ed, which is why they're also isolated and sectioned off from the other kids in the quote-unquote normal or regular classes. But yeah, anyway, I paid attention to the situation of the other abused kids around me, which is how I was able to piece together the idea of the Cash for Kids system. I realized child abuse is an agenda and not a coincidence, because it helps create a communist society of messed up people who will go along with anything since they're broken, brainwashed, and can't think for themselves. And what I commonly say is, they traumatize and turn out the kids and they never become fully functioning adults. These systems were originally made for eugenics, indoctrination, and trauma-based mind control purposes, but they are now used on all types of people. I don't know how to use punctuation, but here's a list I started piecing together at 14. The Cash for Kids system is a multi-billion-dollar industry that makes money off of, further traumatizes, traffics, drugs, labels, molests, locks up, I don't even think I can say that word on here, but I always forget that, and etc. already abused kids, and also kids that don't have parents, which I may have forgot to mention. they either don't have parents because they died or whatever happened where they got put in the foster care system, or they were kidnapped by CPS from their parents, which can also happen to people who aren't getting abused, because of course they really like to kidnap kids who aren't getting abused that they can mess up and break down themselves. I'm trying to figure out how to explain it, but basically mess up people who already haven't been messed up and were fine before. But that's kind of a side thing. So anyway, they also are there to destroy prophetic/anointed people, which is also called empaths. There's a lot of different words these days. Empaths is one of the worldly terms, but it's also commonly used in New Age, which I'm not into that. And then there's another one where people, what is it? It's called starseed, but that's kind of used in a lot of deep occultic stuff. But there's just a lot of different terms, and this is really what it goes back to, which is prophetic/anointed. And there's a lot of other terms that are out there confusing people, but anyway, kids, so they end up too broken, and then I put trauma fractures the soul and creates voids/holes, which can let in spirits and cause brain damage, because the trauma causes brain damage too, which all can lead to mental illness. To meet their calling. If you find out your purpose and realize the truth of what's going on, then you could be told it's quote-unquote magical thinking. So thinking that you were born for a reason, that's considered magical thinking. Thinking that maybe the reason you went through a lot of stuff, or just went through a couple of bad things, thinking that the reason that happened is so you could help other people in a situation or something, anything like that is all considered quote unquote magical thinking. Thinking that you have a purpose in life is called magical thinking. And that's the thing with the mental health system, is that they really want you to be a victim anyway. They want you to have a victim complex, which of course having a victim complex can also lead to schizophrenia, or what I really call it is schizonarcs, because it's kind of the same thing sometimes. Of course, I know that schizophrenia has a spectrum. Of course, most people don't talk about that, but there's definitely different types. Because some of the spirits in narcissism, or at least some of the main two, are Jezebel and then Leviathan, which are both marine spirits, and they revolve around flipping people's words or switch around people's words and a whole bunch of manipulation type stuff. But there's also a type of schizophrenia that I've noticed that's really similar to just being a narcissist. Because those two things can be the same thing basically, because they revolve around some of the same spirits, which are all marine spirits, I'm pretty sure. And so they do the same manipulation stuff, the same victim complex type thing. And so basically the mental health system will try to push victim complexes onto people and make them think that they're a victim, because really they want a world of messed up people anyway. And it actually reminds me of a comment that I seen that I screenshotted and was going to use for another video, where somebody was like, it's funny how the more we focus on mental illness, the more mentally ill the world gets, or something like that. And that was under a video about this lady who was a detransitioner who was in these support groups where they were kids in relationships with molesters and stuff. It was a whole bunch of mess with that. But yeah, so they want you to be a victim, and they don't actually want you to get through any of the things that happen. And like I said before in other videos, the real end goal of the Cash for Kids system is for you to, one, become a really messed up person who can't think for yourself and goes along with all the agendas that are pushed. 2, to end up dead. Or 3, to end up stuck in the systems past 18, to where you're in and out of prison or whatever, because they just messed you up so bad and you don't know how to function. So yeah, these systems want you to believe your purpose is to be a kid who's passed around SA, drugged, and abused in facilities because it's your fault, you're quote-unquote bad. The Cash for Kids system is the American school system, such as boarding schools, military schools, SPED, which stands for special ed, alternative schools, and schools themselves. Mental health system, this is tied into all the branches. TTIs, such as ranches and other placements that are half mental facility, half juvenile justice, although some are cult-based. CPS / foster care / ward of the state / government trafficking abuse cult, as many people call it. Juvenile justice / ward of the state. And then the entertainment industry, which is shows such as Dr. Phil, Karamo, Therapist, Beyond Scare, Straight Girls, Incarcerated, things like that are all exploitative parts of the Cash for Kids system that go around mocking and exploiting people for their trauma symptoms while they're still in their abuse situations, and then they're recording the kids while they're in these jails or these alternative schools for their trauma symptoms. And of course they don't do anything about the kids' situation. They just record them having emotional breakdowns at school and fighting and stuff because of their trauma. And not even just their trauma, but just the current situation that they're in at home. There's also other branches more related to SRE sex trafficking or trafficking in general. Then there's another one I recently thought about where people can just sell their kids to Hollywood and the music industry, and the parents and family get money while the kid is tortured. I've known people who die like this actually, and not just from famous people's horror stories. I knew a boy where the same night the record label flew him to a hotel in LA, he died from a quote-unquote lean overdose. He just turned 16. In fact, I think the night he died was his birthday. And of course, his mom shouldn't have agreed, but I feel like 9 out of 10 he was, I don't know if I can say that on here, but I'll just say Virgo Vasal instead, if I can even say that. But luckily my videos don't get taken down that often, but it has happened to a few. The Cash for Kids system has 2 subtypes, I guess. One where they destroy people, and another where they try to break people and then give them a mic to make money off of them. It reminds me of how a lady named Tiffany Buckner said in one of her live streams or something like that from a year plus ago, or maybe just a year ago. But anyway, she was like, America has a thing for breaking people and then giving them a mic. And then I said, it makes sense though, because that's how they lead a world or nation. For breaking people and then giving them a mic. It makes sense though, because oh dang, I already read this part. That's how they lead a world or nation of broken people, with broken people who have a false image of success. And then that's it. Okay, so here's the draft I have. I had to put it in Gmail because, like I said the other day, this phone does not have a quick memo. And since I don't have Wi-Fi out here, I can't just go to the post and screen record it from where I posted it at. So I copied and pasted it here. The ageism and abuse against traumatized kids. Okay, so this probably has a lot of typos, just like really anything that I type. I really feel like a lot of the times it's not even just me, it's autocorrect too. But anyway, when a kid is resilient to authority because of trauma, they get diagnosed with things like conduct disorder or ODD, which are also diagnoses that are used when a psychiatrist thinks a kid is a sociopath or psychopath but don't want to say it. And also, they usually don't diagnose people under 18 with sociopathy and stuff like that. So instead, they just say conduct disorder or ODD for that reason too. Not really just because they don't want to say that. Okay, so because of the fact that not listening to certain rules from certain people is considered antisocial in the psychiatry world, and they say you think rules don't apply to you.
which is honestly crazy. And somebody actually said something about this, about how they actually have a DSM, and I do too actually. I've had one since 2020, a DSMV. And there's stuff in there that says people underage who don't listen to certain rules from certain people is even considered a disorder. So they were like, the fact that people even listen to the stuff that psychiatrists say is really crazy. But the thing is, why do psychiatrists get to run the whole mental health scene anyway? All they do is prescribe pills. Why can't the psychologists and therapists be the head of everything? The psychiatrists are the ones that are always abusive, and it's like, you barely even hear from the psychologists or the therapists and counselors and stuff. Not to mention the psychiatrists are also the ones that run the mental hospitals too. Well, not run them like they're the boss or something, but like they're the ones that are always there. Because like I said, I haven't been to a place in there. Well, there was one place I went to that did have a therapist. But other than that, none of them had a therapist. You don't get to talk to a psychologist, none of that. And if you're lucky, you get to at least talk to the psychiatrist, but they rarely even let you talk to them. So anyway, where was I? You think rules don't apply to you? If the kid is black, especially if they're a boy, they will even label their trauma as ADHD, which then makes it even easier for the parent to cover up all the kid's trauma symptoms. And actually has something else I said about this another time, so I'm about to see if I still have that. So yeah, I have this right here. This is something that I had commented on some post a while back. It's a screenshot that I actually had put on my story on another app that hasn't been working for me for days. And as you know, this is obviously old because this is still from my old account. ADHD is the biggest abuse cover-up diagnosis, right next to autism and schizophrenia. The diagnosis of ADHD is used to cover up the anger problems, attention problems caused by rumination, flashbacks, maladaptive daydreaming, and dissociation, and learning problems that happen because of childhood trauma. Well, then the other person said, well, that would certainly explain a lot. Because they had actually said something about how they got diagnosed with ADHD. But they also talked about their trauma. Not to mention, it's a known fact that childhood trauma is known to cause ADHD in adulthood. So, then there's something else that someone has said to me about. So somebody has said this to me. Not to mention that the school system and psychiatrists love to use the diagnosis of ADHD against the black boys, and even the girls sometimes too, period. Like, even when it's not to cover up trauma, they just like to diagnose them with that. They get them on those cocaine ADHD pills, but sometimes, I can't remember if they're cocaine or heroin based. I think maybe both. I can't remember which one, but it's one of those. I swear there's a rabbit jumping over there in those bushes or something, near the bushes, because I've been hearing that jumping sound for a while. That reminds me of how I want a therapy pet. I haven't even started reading this yet. That happens for as many other people as possible, which they had also said other stuff before this. And you're so right about black boys' trauma being mislabeled as ADHD. I saw that crap over and over again when I worked with kids in foster care. I literally met 5-year-olds who introduced themselves by their psych labels. It feels especially messed up for black boys who somehow got pathologized and criminalized at the same time. Like, I worked in a school where a teacher handed me a note that said ADHD and not medicated, and pointed to a little boy who she then kicked out of class and threw in, I don't have the rest of that. I think she said threw in isolation room or suspension, in-school suspension. It was one of those. Okay, so I was making sure it's even recording again. Back to what I was just saying. Which then makes it even easier for the parent to cover up all the kids' trauma symptoms. But when adults show trauma symptoms, they are more likely for the psychiatrist. Sometimes. I would really say that it's best to just go to a psychologist if possible. Or really anybody but a psychiatrist. And also avoid mental hospitals and mental facilities at all costs. Unless it's a private one that you pay for. Because I feel like the ones that you pay for are probably the main ones that are actually most likely going to treat you right. But of course everybody doesn't have money for that. Just like how everybody doesn't have money for therapy. And depending on where you live, there might not even really be trauma therapy anyway. But when adults show trauma symptoms, they are more likely for the psychiatrist to actually diagnose them with CPTSD, or PTSD, a personality disorder, or any other problem they got from their trauma. When do you ever meet abused kids that are diagnosed with CPTSD or any of these other diagnoses? Never. Kids' trauma symptoms, even if it's just being depressed, are looked at as being bad, and they get labeled as a kid with a behavior problem. Not to mention, if a psychiatrist or staff in a mental hospital, abusive parents throw their kids in, were to actually acknowledge that a kid is traumatized and diagnose them as such, they will also have to take the initiative to get the kid out of the abusive environment, which of course they don't want to do. Which I think that's also why they don't want to label them with their actual problems that they do have, because then they know that if they were to admit the kid's traumatized, they have to do something about the situation. Although even when the few times that they actually will admit this, they still don't get the person out the situation, obviously. Okay, so I think I already read that part. The mental health professionals don't want to do that because they feel it's not their job. So instead, they drug the kid on neurotoxin, antipsychotics, or less worse but still bad ADHD pills, or Xanax. Xanax is really addictive, but it's not. The side effects aren't as bad as they are with other psychotropic drugs. Then label the kid with the problem they don't have at the parent's request. The only time you meet kids whose trauma is actually recognized is when their abuse was done to them by someone else. An example are kids who were sexually abused by a neighbor's kid or a family friend or something like that. But usually with the family friend, they cover that up too. But sometimes the parents will admit it. But anyway, a neighbor's kid, the parents find out, get authorities involved, get their kid diagnosed and in therapy if it traumatizes them, which it probably will, depending on what all the kid was doing and if they even say yes to this anyway. And they let the school know the kid is traumatized and how to treat them. So yeah, it's only, of course, in situations like this, the parents, unless the parent wants to cover it up because they really like that person's family or whatever, because there's stuff like that happens, especially when it's in family sexual abuse, it gets covered up. But in situations where somebody else did something to the kid, then of course the parent will actually admit that they're traumatized. Nobody's going to do that if they're the one traumatizing the kid. And another example could have been like if a kid was getting beat on by a teacher at school or something and they got traumatized from that, or like the kids in school shootings. Of course the parents will admit the trauma then. So anyway, obviously only in situations like this will the kid's trauma be recognized, because the parent / guardian / family who is abusing the kid aren't going to admit they're abusing the kid. Or at least sometimes people will, though, to be honest, because they know that nobody cares and nobody will do anything. But it's still kind of rare. Okay, wait a minute. So the kid's trauma symptoms go unacknowledged, unlabeled, and brushed off. The kid's trauma symptoms even get labeled as other things. And if the kid is a person of color, it will be even worse, because that's when you get called ADHD and sometimes even juvenile delinquent for being traumatized. Like, a lot of kids have drug addictions from trauma, but instead they get called a juvenile delinquent and they go to jail for that. It never makes sense why anybody goes to jail for drug addiction anyway, so it's going to be stupid regardless of who's what color and what age. There are so many systems put in place to punish kids for being traumatized, but zero systems put in place to help traumatized kids and get them out of the traumatizing situations. There are so many... Wait a minute, how many minutes is this? Okay, luckily it's only 10 minutes, so I should be able to make this next video, and maybe the ones I want to make after this. Okay, traumatizing situations. There are so many systems put in place to further traumatize, punish, and make money off of abused kids. The Cats for Kids industry is literally a multi-billion-dollar industry, which the foster care system is also connected to, since they also put kids in mental facilities all the time whenever they get mad about something, just like the parents to put them in there. And also when they don't have a foster home to put them in, sometimes kids get put in juvenile detention centers and mental facilities that they shouldn't be in. Like, there are people that had trauma from being sexually abused, and that's why they got put in foster care, because they're being sexually abused, and then they ended up in juvenile detention centers or mental facilities with sex offenders. and even sex offenders that they're way younger than too at that, like a 5-year-old girl, and then they're in there with a sex offender who's like a 14-year-old boy. So stuff like that happens all the time, especially like when they stopped having orphanages, because it just made stuff a lot worse because of the kid to staff ratio. And so when America had to stop having orphanages, a lot of kids got thrown in juvenile detention centers, mental hospitals, and TTIs because there was nowhere else for them to go. So anyway, where was I at? They make money off of abused kids. The cash for kids industry is, okay, I already read that. The CEOs of these mental facilities / TTIs, because TTIs are connected to the mental health system and the juvenile detention system. Okay, juvenile detention centers, special ed classes, schools / schools, like special schools, alternative schools is really what I meant. Military schools and boarding school punishments get to live in mansions for punishing traumatized kids. They even take the kids through extra abuse, psychological, sexual, physical, and verbal. No one steps up against it yet when people like me and you, because I had posted this somewhere, so that's the me and you that I was talking about, tell our stories to the lucky people who didn't experience it. We get called liars or crazy. It's always so annoying to me how people that don't go through this stuff always want to tell the people that did go through it that they're lying and that stuff like this can't possibly exist because it's illegal and it's against the law and all that. It's like, honestly, the non-traumatized people and the lucky people really live in la la land, if you ask me. But I mean, with all the stuff that goes on in the world, it's already a known fact, like especially with the people in the U.S., that a lot of people live in la la land to be able to go to sleep at night and don't want to acknowledge any of the stuff, or at least most of the stuff that really goes on a daily basis, like how people in the U.S. still like that, like sex trafficking doesn't go on. But that's a whole nother story and conversation. So where was I at? They even take his, okay, I already read that. We get called liars or crazy. I do believe that if the masses actually knew this stuff went on, people would probably band together to stop it. Because the thing is, people think that these facilities aren't as bad as they were when they were first made in like the 60s and 50s and stuff. But, I mean, of course, some of the same stuff doesn't go on, at least depending on where you're at. They're not much different than they used to be. Because people always want to talk about the words retarded and redundant and, what's the other words? And incompetent. Those actually were actual diagnoses, and those words were used by psychiatrists on people with Down syndrome and stuff. Because a lot of times, mental hospitals were filled with people with Down syndrome and microcephaly and stuff. And then people who had mental illnesses had to try to pretend that they didn't have them just to not get locked up. And that's the thing. It's crazy how so many people are in there against their will that shouldn't even be in there. Yet there are people that walk the streets every day, all day, that really should be in these places if they were actually helpful, at least. Because not in these places getting abused, but like a place that actually helps people, at least halfway. The people that really should be in these places never end up getting in there. But anyway, so here's the last paragraph. Here in GA, they have abusive specialist self-confined punishment placements for quote-unquote bad black kids, where kids who are in group homes or kids with abusive parents get put. Black kids have gotten put in these placements for saying, and there's me trying to sting me. Well, let me move. What was I about to say though? Oh yeah, I didn't even know what most of these places actually were though, until somebody from Reddit had sent me articles about it. Cause like, I didn't know what EBD stood for, and now I know that EBD stands for emotionally and behaviorally disturbed. And I also seen in the articles that these placements were used during the Jim Crow era, and some of the same buildings are still used, and they use the same tactics and stuff. I'm trying to figure out, where was I at? Okay, so I don't even think I got that far. Black kids have gotten put in these placements for saying the word, and for getting into fights, even if they were defending themselves. Although I shouldn't have been there, I got put there. Wait a minute, where in the world? Hold up. I shouldn't have been there. I got put there because of my mom. I still had to get abused by the 3 staff members all day, sit in the trailer all day, get escorted everywhere, even the bathroom, which was actually in the school building. Had to ask to sit down and ride the short bus by myself. Sometimes though, but luckily, one of the quote-unquote normal kids did ride the bus with me because she had birth defects, like she couldn't walk. So, I mean, I was kind of luckier than the other kids, I guess. I guess I was. There was only like 4 of us in there anyway. And so then, the kids who went to the school in the building were called the normal kids by the three special ed staff. And I was referred to, and I was referred to as someone with a disability. And so were the other kids, even though I don't have a disability. I was lied to and told I was switching schools, but once I got there, after realizing the trailer wasn't just my first period because I had been in there all day, and I actually found out that most of the kids that were in there, I thought they were just kids that were in my class. They were actually just in there taking a test, which eventually the pod staff stopped testing people in there because the kids they would take a week to finish the 20-question test because their focus would be on the pod staff talking junk to us the whole time. So, anyway, in there all day because of the 3 staff members making fun of me and the staff, they said I thought it was a slow. Oh yeah, and because of the stuff that they said, like how they were like, I'm surprised you can read and all that, and I must be seeing stuff because it says your Lexile score is over 1,100 or 1,009, something like that. I don't even remember what it was. I thought it was a slow class for the first 2 weeks, trying to figure out where I was at though. It was also called the EBD unit. Once someone I met on Reddit sent me articles about Georgia's racist special ed system, I finally understood what this special ed self-confined place was and what EBD means. Of course, the pod staff did want to get me out of there though, because they did say that I shouldn't have ever been placed there, and I didn't need to be there. Anyway, EBD stands for emotionally disturbed, so they are admitting that they are punishing us for being traumatized, because that's what emotionally disturbed means. Punishing us for being traumatized in the name of temporary placement. I snuck and rode the bus with the normal kids in the morning a few times on the last few days of me going to school. Luckily, I didn't get caught. I was scared because one of the sped staff was a morning bus lane monitor. I couldn't do this in the afternoon though because I got escorted and watched when getting on the afternoon bus, which was also my morning bus. I got AB honor roll but couldn't go to the ceremony because it was a service for the normal kids who went to the school in the building, and I wasn't allowed to talk to the counselors or any staff in the building. I even got in trouble because a normal kid made me go to the counselors and report my home situation and suicidalness, and the special ed staff cursed me out and put me in the system that they suspended me and wrote me up, which I have videos of that.